we're ready.
Yeah, hi.
Welcome to this talk about diversity in startups. And welcome to this PreSeed Academy talk about diversity in startups. And thank you to TechBBQ for this organization, very well organized. And thank you for taking up these really important topics to the agenda. My name is Helle, as Senja just said. I'm an investor from PreSeed Ventures, also a future partner of the fund that we hopefully soon will be able to announce. Welcome to you, Nico. You are the CEO and founder of Platypus, and maybe you would introduce yourself a little bit, and also what does Platypus do?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, first of all, and thank you for TechBBQ to organize. So my name is Nico. I'm French. You can hear this from the accent. Very difficult to hide. I've been trying for like 20 years, but it just doesn't go away. I've been living in Denmark for the past 8 years now. I've worked in the startup community for the past 8 years. I was lucky enough to start at Trustpilot in 2012 when we were 30 people, grew the company from 30 to about 350. Then I went to Falcon, then I went to Unity. I passed by Revolut, which is not based in Copenhagen, and probably why I didn't like it, and then came back to work at Picon. And in February last year, February 18, 19, yeah, we're 18 months old. I started Platypus with my co-founder, Dan, who has a background in recruitment and HR as well. So between the two of us, we probably worked in HR close to 40 years, HR and recruitment. So we've seen a lot of things. We've seen lots of good stuff. We've seen lots of bad stuff, really a lot of bad stuff. And that led us to start or to the idea of Platypus. And the idea of Platypus is very much to bring data when there's no data, for companies to actually realize what is the actual culture of the organization via the values of their employees, aggregating this data and giving a cultural map of the organization that can then be used for every aspect of the talent lifecycle, which is talent management, talent attraction, and talent retention. And we're very lucky to have a PreSeed on board. Thank you again.
Yeah, we were one of the first investors in the very
you
first
were.
round, just a few months actually after you founded the company.
Yeah, like we founded the company officially in February, and you guys came on board in July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you think, Nico, that diversity is important in a startup?
I think especially in a startup, right? In a startup, it's all about evolution as fast as possible and the creativity and innovation as fast as possible. And if you keep on getting the same type of people, whether like culturally, gender, ethnicity, we can look at this further on. But if you keep on hiring people that are basically just an echo chamber, like people that are like yes men or yes woman, you're not going to evolve. And if I look at us internally at Platypus, if it would have been just Dan and I, and then we kept on hiring white heterosexual men in their 40s, we would not have built the product that we have today, because we would keep on not reflecting and not challenging ourselves on what we believe is the right thing to do. The idea of diversity is positive conflict. It's people that are going to think differently than you and make you reflect on what you believe is the right thing to do in your organization. That could be product, that could be sales, that could be tech development, it could be anything. But the idea of diversity, early days in a startup, is in my mind more than important. It's critical because you're all about innovation and thinking outside of the box.
And also actually surveys, or so many surveys now actually shows that diversity does matter, not only intuitively it matters, but also that it makes sense purely from a business perspective.
On the
diverse teams
perform better.
Yeah.
They perform better. They perform better on the bottom line.
Yeah.
Like just looking at the way countries have been managing COVID. Globally, there's lots of articles around this, around like diversity of the countries that have been doing better when it comes to manage COVID, and talking a lot around like New Zealand, Germany, Denmark, for instance. So it's more than it's important. It's a fact now in terms of the business.
And I think also actually startups, particularly startups, they have a unique chance of being those change agents, actually, that it's a blank piece of paper, it's a new generation. You actually have the chance of doing things differently than what we normally do in the established business society. So I think startups really have this chance now of changing actually the world we live in, not only with regards to what products they build, but also in the way they build their organizations.
I mean, we are the future of work.
Yeah. exactly.
Quite literally, right?
Yeah.
And the whole idea, and like you say, is not only finding it important, finding it like actually critical and a must do, and using it to make your organization better, faster, and more efficient. Yeah.
Yeah, and you briefly mentioned before, but we've also talked about how in this talk that we would like to, how we would like to define diversity. I mean, diversity is of course gender, but it's so much more than gender. It's not only the gender talk, not only a gender talk. I mean, there's been done a lot of surveys with regards to gender, but diversity is also a lot of other things. As you mentioned. It's age, it's education, it's
religion, education, sexuality. I mean, it's very, very broad. Exactly, it's a very, very broad subject. Reducing it to gender, and we know that gender is a very, very important one, but reducing it to gender is actually not inclusive to the other aspect of diversity. So it is everything. It's diversity of thoughts, diversity of nationality, background, age as well. We're very lucky that again at Platypus we this is obviously linked to the mission of the organization, right? To have understand your culture and have a diverse culture. But out of 18 people, we have 11 nationalities, which was very important for us. We have people that come from Russia, Jordan, Spain, France. That's me. Multiple, and then like on the gender, we are a good 50% split, which for early day startup is something that you don't see every day. We know this, and we're proud to show that you can make it work as soon as possible in working on that front. On the age group, we something that we want to work on as well, because I think very often it's something that's not talked about. Diversity, especially in startups.
Yeah, that.
When you see everyone between 20 and 30, and as I said, as a 40, I'm just 40, not 40 plus yet. My co-founder is 40 plus. I hope he's listening, and I just said it on TV. But my co-founder and I, like, for us, it's important to not only just look at, diversity is diverse. I know it's kind of like Captain Obvious, but that's the whole idea. And you need to try to tackle every aspect, otherwise you're not inclusive and diverse.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking, you know, I see, of course, a lot of really early stage founders, and they have, everyone knows, or you know it also, that they have so many things on their plate. They have lots to do, lots to see to, but why should they actually prioritize diversity at these really early days also?
I mean, we all have everything. There's a lot on your plate, that's a fact. But it's an investment on the long run. I mean, if you want to go faster and quicker and think better, it should not even be a thought. It should just be natural to think that, of course, I can hire X person that I feel will be easier for me to work with and is going to say yes to me all the time and everything. But in the long run, yes, it's easy now. In the long run, and when I mean long run in terms of startup, it's 6 months from now. It's not 3 years from now. In the long run, it's not going to help you. We've, from day one, set ourselves to hire people that were very different than us, people that would challenge us and tell us no. And like being able to disagree in a positive way, in a constructive manner. You can pretty much only bring this than with hiring like diverse group of people. And like you said, when I say diverse, it doesn't have to be systematically gender or whatever. Like it can be like a person from Lithuania, for instance. That's not the same background as me as a French person or a Danish person or an English person. That person would think differently and tackle the angle, the problem with a different angle. And it worked for us, and I'm not saying, I mean, it works for, you know, in your portfolio as well, that you have organizations that are extremely diverse from day one. I don't know if you can tell in front of people that they work better or not, but I assume that they do.
Yeah, and also actually something we've discussed a lot with once we have, now that we've been fundraising for our fund, it's something that our investors ask us about. So how do you actually make sure that you invest in socially responsible companies? I mean, not only because they want to show social responsibility, they want that as well, but also because they know that the future workforce, they don't want to work for companies that don't act socially responsible.
Exactly.
I mean, if you want to attract talent in the future, you just have to have a social agenda. You have to have, they demand that of you. I mean, so I think if you want to attract the top talent, you just can't afford not to prioritize it also from the early days.
Completely. I mean, it's you're shooting yourself in the foot. You won't go faster. I just look at this one because I think that's something that we didn't touch upon. So do we look into neurodiversity and disabled diversity as well? One of the first things, so we started in my basement because, you know, you need to start somewhere, you don't have money, and it's a basement on Hamar, so, you know, it's not very handicap friendly if you want to hire. But the first thing we wanted to do in the first office that we wanted to have was to have an office that's actually accessible. This is something that's close to my heart because I have a younger sister that's in a wheelchair as well, and even when she comes to Copenhagen, I want her to be able to come and visit the office. So it's something that we look into. Some diversity some diversity group are obviously harder to detect, like religion, age. It's not something that you can legally, sexuality, ask during an interview, of course. That's illegal. I say it again. You should not ask this during an interview process. So the handicap, I think, is one that we don't talk enough about. And God knows, and you know, I love Copenhagen, but Copenhagen, I think, can do some efforts on that front, on the diversity on the handicap side of things.
So when, I mean, what is the risk if we wait too long? I mean, to talk about diversity in a startup, we briefly touched upon it just before, but what is actually the challenge?
What I've seen a lot in the organizations that I've worked at in the past is that it's not something that were talked about, or you know, it was a nice to have, not a must have, or not something that's on the cahier des charges, like we will do it because it's something that's important to us. The problematic is you might make your company successful. I'm not saying that it's systematically going to fail. I just don't think it's going to be as fast. The second thing is that at some point, like you said, people start looking at CSR, at what is your company looking like? Is it a sausage race? Everyone is white, right? And when it's that case and you want to catch back on diversity, you won't, because it's impossible to catch back. Multiple reasons. It's very difficult to suddenly turn we're not looking at diversity to we look at diversity in terms of recruitment, because you have like a whole legacy of we didn't look at it before. Then you need to think about, like, you're basically working in an organization that's not diverse. Think about the first people that are going to come in that are supposed to be the bringing change for diversity. You're really not making their life easy, and it won't be smooth. So if you don't start from day one, and if you wait, you won't catch back, and you're probably not going to have a great name for it on the market. And it hurts.
I think all of us that has tried working in, for example, an established corporate, we know how difficult it is to change something that once things become, this is how we used to do things, it's just so much harder, and it comes earlier than you think, I think.
Completely.
Yeah, so
and that's why it needs to be tackled early, and it needs to be ingrained in the culture of the organization, that it's something that's important. It needs to be at every layer of the organization as well. If you see diversity, and let's be a little bit cliche here, but if you see diversity only in the HR and the marketing department, you see women, and in the tech department only men, that's not diversity. That's bullshit diversity. That's diversity for the numbers, not for the showing, right? So yes, maybe it's harder to find some tech talent, for instance, that are like diverse, but it's more worth it, and you will win on the long run.
So what do you think, if you want to build a diverse startup, what concrete things can you do from day one? I mean, what are the, this is what I can do tomorrow things if I want to focus on diversity?
Number one is understanding that I'm not doing this for any kind of wrong reason. I'm doing this because I know that it's valuable, and it's gonna make my organization successful. That's number one. Number two, something we did with Dan, and yes, we have the luxury of having a background in recruitment, that helps, but taking a hardcore look at what are we. So we're two white, male, heterosexual in our 40s. This is our group. Do we want the same? Absolutely not. How do we attract and discuss with people that are not the same as us? And are they not going to be, how do we make it inclusive? Right? Number three is on your sourcing. So, I mean, again, easier for us because of the background, but you need to be able to attract the right diverse talent. And for this, that means you need to work on your employer branding. And when we're very early days in a startup, your employer branding is your mission. If you don't make your mission and what you're building something that's inclusive and going to be interesting to a lot of diverse people, it's simply not going to work. So the onboarding, I think, is critical as well. You can try to create a diverse workforce, a diverse team, but if you're not inclusive in your way of managing this workforce, making sure that everyone has a voice and can express the fact that they don't think like you, they're not going to stay. And if they're not staying, all the efforts have been useless.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes you can get the feeling that okay, working with mission, vision, values can be some kind of is it just a thing we just have to do because it's in the textbooks? But I actually, with regards to diversity and with regards to this and who you attract, etc., I think it's super important that you have worked with those things.
Completely.
So you actually defined what is our what is our say in these points, right? And also, how do we measure them? I mean, I think that's one of the things, you know, we always say what you measure is what you get. And I think also you could set up specific goals for diversity.
Yes. I've seen it in big companies. When I was hiring for Unity Technology, and we hired 500 people in 2 years, we had goals on diversity. Clear goals, and it worked. Another last thing I would say around just because you asked me why should you do it from day one, you really need to think, even if you don't think it's valuable, even if you just think like I'm just following the trend and it's the big trend, investors just like you, Helle, they look at this. They look at, have you thought about this? Is this something that you take into account? And you will have your case going up because it's something that you take into account, and you can show to investors from day one, we take this seriously and we care for this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing I really learned during our fundraising for our fund is I thought our investors would say only, okay, what is the return on investment money-wise? And of course, they still say that as the top KPI. But every one of them asks us, what is your ESG strategy?
Yeah.
How do you work with ESG also in the startup level? And they really also like that we want to support this agenda actually from the very get-go.
Yeah.
And that's something that I find really positive, that also the big organizations behind the funds actually start working with this and also actually start demanding this from the fund managers as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And then of course something we talk about internally is also of course unconscious bias. And it's maybe it's not actually unconscious because, or it is, but we know we have it. So and everyone should know that they have unconscious bias. No
something we've
what.
done to try to tackle this, something we've done is understanding that we do have unconscious bias, that we can try to be aware of it, but some will still go through, and to bring other people than us in the organization, in the recruitment process, in the discussions that we have with candidates, so that somebody can flag, hey, maybe you have a bias on this. And again, like I think the critical part to make this work is to be genuine and honest around having open discussions around this. You can't create diversity without inclusivity. It's not going to work. And to have inclusivity, you need to be open to discuss everything with your workforce.
We have some questions from the audience, actually. It was really nice with some interactions. So who decides the course of diversity in an organization? Ideally the CEO, but how long can she afford the discussion? Or
so 100% the CEO, the founders drive this, management drive this, because you know it's lead by example, lead by behavior. How long can she afford this discussion? It should never leave the CEO table. Of course, you see more and more companies hiring director of diversity, director of inclusivity, but that doesn't mean I'm not working on it anymore. It should be like, no, this is my spearheading the efforts on diversity and inclusivity. But the CEOs, that should be on the table all the time for the reasons that we've just talked before. It just makes sense financially. Even only for this, even if you don't believe it, be very cynical about this, it makes sense financially.
And then we have actually a very today kind of question. Do you encourage your startups to think remote and build diverse teams in terms of location also, or should startups still look centrally or to centralize their business? And that's of course also, I think, a question for both of us actually, because I think one of the things that we've learned during these COVID times is also the value of meeting up sometimes. I mean, remote work works, and also actually I think what we've learned from the past month or half year is also that it works very well. But it also, at least that's a learning we have done in our organization, is also that how much value it has to actually meet up in person as well. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why we say that diverse teams with regards to geography can of course work, but there also needs to be a very big element of meeting up in person as well. So how do you see this?
So I see it from a personal point of view, which is again my opinion and not the truth. Is I like to be in the office. I like to see people and be close to people personally. So for us, it was for Dan and I, it was important to have an office and being able to have people work in in the location of the office. I think now we've reached 18 people. We would be more open to the idea of remote. And again, this is true for me. I know companies that have done remote from day one, and it works great for them. I think the challenge I see around here is early days. It's all about building that relationship and that trust, and we're still very social animal. It's easier to build this relationship and trust when you're sitting next to a person, when you grab a coffee with a person, than it is doing a unlimited amount of video calls. So personal opinion, we liked and it worked for us to make it remote. Sorry, like local, and everyone in the office. We do have work from home whenever you want, unlimited vacation and everything, because we don't want people to feel forced that they have to come to the office. But for us, it worked better that way. Yes.
Yeah. So I think diverse teams are really good, but it's also really nice to sometimes gather up in person, right?
Yes.
And so you can actually have those discussions around the input. I think, you know, a diverse team, you have each your opinion, your perspectives to put into everything, like from product development to go-to-market plans, etc. But actually, I also think that maybe this period of time has taught us that you can have lots of those discussions also remotely.
Of course.
Yeah.
And you can make it. I mean, we've done it here in Copenhagen for what, 6 weeks? It was the lockdown. That was unpleasant, but we made it work. And then for us, what we knew that building a relationship with your colleague is something that was important at Platypus because of the tool. And so what we started implementing is daily get together. The 18 people get together on Zoom and spend like 30 minutes together, so that we could still see each other, discuss, and align, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually did that as well. Also, Friday bars, you know, where we sit each person at home with a beer and saying have a nice weekend to all the colleagues. So we have a fourth question from the audience. So how do employees get to contribute to shaping the culture in the workplace besides just memes on Slack? So is there any bottom-up approach that you've seen working from how to get employees, how to get them what do you say, into this whole subject, that also become a part of
the organization,
of what the goals are?
Yeah. Well, I mean, here obviously I would love to talk about Platypus as a product, but let's not go in the.
I think it's fine if you. That's a concrete example.
A concrete example. So Platypus, the whole idea is to gather data around what's important to people, and once you know this, then you can open up subjects, and then you engage your whole workforce around. We know for a fact that diversity or flexibility is something that's extremely important to you as employees, and how do we build the culture around this? How do we make sure that you have the voice? Like the people need to realize that they have a massive impact. Every single person working in an organization has a massive impact on the culture of that organization. And you should just open up. And it's the responsibility of management and leadership to make this possible, to be open up and have inclusive discussions around this. So bottom-up approach I've seen working is be blunt, be genuine, be honest, and tell people what's important to you and what you care for. And hopefully diversity is one of those things.
So what do you use the results from the Platypus survey to? What do you use it for, like in concrete terms?
For example, concrete term, like we were able to see that there was a discrepancy, a misalignment on one of the values, well-being. Well-being is extremely important to people working at employees at Platypus. And if you look at management, we have a team of 6 people working in the leadership in management. Actually, a team that's 50% male, 50% female, because we care. It's important. And the managers don't care that much for well-being. It's not that they don't care about it for the organization. They don't care about it for themselves. If you ask me, I mean, I've worked in my basement for 6 months. I don't care if I have to do it again or not. But I understand that for the employees, that for them it's important to have a nice desk, a good coffee, and for the organization to show that we care for them. Now that you're aware of that discrepancy, I can bring up that discussions and let people know that, you know what, I might not have this as something that's important to me, but I want to be inclusive in the culture of my organization, and I'm going to bring up that subject. What can we do? What can we change to make your life better at Platypus? Simply.
Yeah,
That's one
thank you.
example.
I think we should. We have a few more minutes. If we have some concluding remarks, I think one concluding remark could be maybe a cliche. I mean, can you actually afford not working with diversity in a startup? That would be one of my conclusions of the talk, and also the thoughts I've had before this talk is. You really need to have some kind of stand with regards to these issues, not only diversity, but in general, how to act responsibly as a company. I mean, I don't think, for us as investors at least, we of course look at what is the monetary value of that company in the long run, but we also look very much as, can you actually build a company in the long run that is worth a lot monetary-wise if it's not acting socially responsible, with regards, for example, to diversity, but also so many other topics.
And I don't think you can, not anymore. I think we've seen companies trying to do so and failing at it. We see now organizations that never cared about it and are trying to catch back and communicate like, yeah, we're so big on diversity, we care about it, and then you can actually call it employer branding or bullshit branding. If it's not driven at the core of the organization by the employees, then it's not part of the culture of the company, right? So
yeah, and I think before maybe we've talked about it like it was opposites, like saying one thing is economic value, the other thing is an impact, or if you're an impact investor or an impact startup. But I think actually today you can merge those two things and say, okay, you can actually make money off being responsible and working responsibly. Yeah,
you should definitely.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand.
I mean, we're trying to make it work like this at Platypus. So we want to have a positive impact on culture, and then diversity is part of this, and showing that it's a very strong return on investment on the culture of your company.
Let that be the concluding remark, and thank you very much, Nico,
Thank you, Helle,
for contributing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.